Reporting. Joining me now is Pakistan's ambassador to the U.S., Rizwan Saeed Sheikh. As we've said, Pakistan is hosting and mediating this weekend's talks between the U.S. and Iran. Mr. Ambassador, thank you so much for being here. We really appreciate it.
Thank you, Kristen, for having me.
Well, this is a critical moment, and Pakistan is the mediator in these high-stakes talks. Let's just set the scene here, because Pakistan's parliamentary, or I should say Iran's parliamentary speaker, who's leading the talks from the Iranian side, is saying that the talks will not move forward if there's not an actual ceasefire in Lebanon. It sounds like Israel has scaled back its attacks, but hasn't halted the attacks altogether. Do you think these talks are actually going to happen tomorrow?
I think a lot of diplomatic effort and intense diplomatic effort has gone into bringing things to this good stage where it stands. And Pakistan, in keeping with its long-standing tradition of making things happen on the international scene, has certainly put in a lot. Our partners, multiple partners, countries like Türkiye, Saudi Arabia and Egypt have certainly made a lot of effort. Others have made a lot of effort. So while this thing has been brought to this stage, and the delegations are either flying in or have already flown in, I believe the talks are very much on the cards. And if there are any issues, perhaps, that might not have been resolved to the satisfaction of either of the two conflicting parties, I believe those are threads that can be picked up within the talks themselves. And once they sit down in Islamabad tomorrow and discuss matters at length, if there are any wrinkles that need to be ironed out before that, that should be done. But since the delegations are either airborne, as I said, or are already there, it stands to happen, I believe.
Okay, so you're confident these talks are going to move forward. I want to be very clear on where Pakistan stands. Do you believe that there needs to be a ceasefire that applies to Lebanon in order for these talks to move forward? Because the White House and Israel is saying Lebanon was not a part of the ceasefire agreement. Iran says that's not the case. How do you see it?
I think whatever has been part of discussions going into these talks needs to be honored, whether it is one or the other point, and would certainly have a salutary impact on not just the optics or completion of the process that has gone into reaching this stage, but the substantive discussions themselves.
I want to play you a little bit of what Vice President J.D. Vance had to say about the situation and Iran's lead negotiator. Take a listen to what he had to say.
I think this comes from a legitimate misunderstanding. I think the Iranians thought that the ceasefire included Lebanon, and it just didn't. Let me just say this. I actually wonder how good he is at understanding English, because there are things that he said that frankly didn't make sense in the context of the negotiations that we've had.
So Vice President J.D. Vance saying this is all a big misunderstanding. What do you say to people who hear that and say, if there was a misunderstanding about the very definition of what a ceasefire should look like, how can an agreement be reached to end these hostilities in Iran, which is far more complicated?
I think the most significant part of this whole episode that would start unfolding in Islamabad tomorrow is the constructive spirit with which both sides have approached it. I mean, it would not have been agreed to had they not been confident of the talks in Islamabad, or had they not been ready to conduct those talks in Islamabad. So while they agreed to it, and they are, either they are already there or they are on way to Islamabad as we speak, it stands to take place. And it is in the nature of conflict that it is not fully resolved until it is resolved. So that is where it's a work in progress. And if there are matters that need to be fine-tuned, the process itself, the talks themselves will address it.
And there are so many sticking points, and they're very complicated issues. What do you think can be accomplished in these talks? In other words, what are the tangible results that you think can be achieved?
Well, as a facilitator, the role is to bring the conflicting parties together and let them decide what satisfies them or what does not. But in diplomacy, we say that at the end of any negotiation, if both sides have a good or an equal measure of comfort or an equal measure of discomfort, then the negotiations are successful because you find the way forward. So as a facilitator, Pakistan basically is bringing them together. And we would be ready to afford maybe advice if it is solicited, if it is required, on whichever aspect it is required, and to the extent that it is required. Because ultimately it is upon the conflicting parties themselves to strike a solution. So while we wish them well, we bring the good intentions of the entire international community, because we have been receiving calls. Our leadership has been, 50 plus only yesterday, of support. So while everybody is watching with bated breath and hoping that this brings a result, what is the result exactly that the two sides are looking for will only be known at the end of it.
I have to ask you, because President Trump has warned, has threatened to hit Iran hard if no deal is reached. Do you take President Trump at his words?
I think in a conflict, hostilities are basically the name of the game. They have taken place. For now, there is an agreement on ceasefire. And for now, the word of President Trump, the word of the Iranian leadership, that they are ready to hold hostilities and go for a negotiated settlement, lend dialogue and diplomacy space and opportunity, is more in play and should be focused on. If we get this right, I think we would not have to go anywhere else.
Well, it would be hugely significant. Ambassador Sheikh, thank you so much for being here to bring us your perspective on this critical matter at this critical moment.
Thank you, Kristen.
Thank you. Wonderful to have you. Turning now to the economic fallout from the war against Iran.